All right, I guess we'll call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask John Porch to call the roll, please.
Vinnie Picciarelli,
Present.
Lindsay Mosca. Lindsay?
She's frozen.
All right. I'll come back to her, I guess. Dee Dee Galston,
Here.
Heidi Perkins. Heidi's not here yet?
He'll be
Nope.
coming any second.
Okay. Lori Cable,
Yes.
Steve Magoon,
Present.
Tom Tracy. Tom, can you hear me? Paul Anastasi,
Here.
Kelly Krobbaum, Leo Patterson. Leo? Is that Leo there, Arsen? Is he, I think he's here, right?
Yes, he's here. Tom Tracy is here, and Lindsay is here as well.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Sorry,
Lindsay.
you guys froze up.
Let's see, Lindsay. Heidi? Heidi? Okay.
I'm here.
Okay,
Mark,
present, and John Porch.
present.
Kelly is in, and I believe Tom Tracy is in, so,
Yeah, I'm here.
okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, let's move on, and we'll go to Christie or Scott. Who's going to start off tonight?
Scott will share the screen. And everyone, we have improved audio from Scott when he unmutes.
Do I have the ability to share my screen, Christy, or are you going to do that?
Nope, I think Victoria can give you that. Perfect.
Okay. I guess I'll do this. We'll go with the meeting minutes. Can I get a motion on the minutes?
From
Video.
June 3rd. Yep, if you can go to the next page, Scott.
Mr. Chairman, there were no minutes that were sent with the agenda.
There were no minutes. They were sent in a file the next day.
I don't recall seeing them. I see
Okay.
it was the agenda, then there was the presentation, and then there was the invoices, but I don't.
Then we will skip over this one. Next item on the agenda is invoices. Tom had sent out some things late this afternoon. I don't know.
All right. So I did. So there were two sets of invoices. So for the first one, you want me to? Is Tom?
Hold on one second. Can we just, if you could unmute Tom on the 972-6460 number that's up there?
Okay, now I'm in.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, the first invoice is for the high school project. There's only one for Compass Project Management for the period ending June 27th, which is $9,043.50. And for the elementary school project, there is three vendors that we need to approve. Application number 1 for the GC Brat Builders Corp. for $2,311,574.43. A. Wallaker and Son, the moving company, for $76,590. And for Colliers International, who's the commissioning agent, for 2 months, May 31st and June 30th, for a total of $6,918.42.
Can I get a motion on those invoices, please?
So I make a motion to approve the high school invoice of $9,043.50.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Can I get a roll call, please, John?
Lindsay Mosca,
Yes.
Lindsay, Dee Dee Galston,
Yes.
Heidi Perkins, Heidi, Lori Cable,
Yes.
Steve
Sorry.
McGill,
Yes.
Tom Tracy,
Yes.
Paul Anastasi,
Yes.
Kelly Crowbaum,
Yes.
Leo Patterson,
Yes.
Vinnie Picciarelli,
Yes.
Mark Sideris,
Yes, John Ports?
yes.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on the elementary school invoices, please?
I make a motion, we approve the invoices totaling $2,395,882.85.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I just want to say on the Brake Builders invoice, it was about, the invoice they submitted was about 2.6 million something, but between the project management team and Mr. Dunlap, they have whittled it down that they thought that this was the appropriate amount. So that's where we got that figure. So, can I get a roll call, please, John?
Dee Dee Galston, Dee Dee,
Yes.
Heidi Perkins,
Yes.
Lori Cable,
Yes.
Steve Magoon,
Yes.
Tom Tracy,
Yes.
Paul Anastasi,
Yes.
Kelly Crowbaum,
Yes.
Leo Patterson,
Yes.
Lindsay Mosca,
Yes.
Vinnie Picciarelli,
Yes.
Mark Sideris,
Yes, John Ports?
yes.
Thank you.
Could I ask just who was the second for the high school on the motion?
Tom Tracy.
Tom Tracy was.
Okay, for both. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Scott?
We have a very brief update on the elementary schools project before we get on to the high school. And all of this is information we've talked to the building committee about previously. But as you may recall, when we talked about the exterior materials for the building, we indicated that there was a possibility that we might have to consider some substitute materials, and that we didn't want to say specifically and show exactly what the material color palette might be until we had the submittal from the contractor. And it's all good news. We did, in fact, the contractor did, in fact, submit Parklex as the wood material for the exterior. They submitted Aluka Bond as the metal, which is who we had hoped for. We got the glass we wanted. Everything is exactly as we wanted. But prior to approving the color, we just wanted to circle back to the building committee and just talk a little bit about the same thing that we talked about in the past, and that is the fact that we are proposing to use a slightly a lighter color, if you will, on the Hosmer School, and we've been showing that in the renderings. It happens to be referred to as the Parklex color gold for the Hosmer, and then a slightly darker color for the Cuniff building to give them just a little bit of dissimilarity. I mean, they're very different buildings in many regards as it is, but those are the two colors. Now we're proposing to leave those actual samples at Town Hall. If anybody would like to go take a look at them, obviously, if you're interested, it would be better than to see them in person than to see them on a computer screen. But they are the colors that we've talked about for those two. We included some representative colors to just show the committee that we wouldn't want to go as dark as any of the other range of colors or as red as any of the other range of colors. And for that reason, we continue to propose that the difference between the two be the gold versus the copper color. And that's for all of the wood material that you see in the renderings. We received, as I mentioned, the metal panel manufacturer that we wanted, and the metal would be all the areas that you see here. Again, it's very difficult to represent the metal on a computer screen. We would encourage anybody who's interested to go take a look at Town Hall, but the metal we're choosing is not highly reflective. It's a composite silver finish, so it provides us the silver that we're looking for without being highly reflective. And then in the glass, the building will essentially be clear glass. We have to do that to meet the daylighting requirements, so we don't want any heavy tinting of the glass. And the renderings can be a bit misleading because the renderers try to be very dramatic in their renderings, and although clear glass will reflect some of the blue sky, it won't be as reflective as you perhaps see in these renderings, but it'll be primarily clear glass. But in areas where we have a piece of structural steel behind the glass or perhaps a floor slab, we'll be using spandrel glass, which is opaque and it blocks out what you can see behind it. That's to hide those structural pieces or those floor slabs. There's very little of that on the building. I'm pointing to this area, but that doesn't mean there's any of it in this area. But in those cases, we are proposing to use a blue tint on the Hosmer and then a green tint on the Cunniff to make them slightly different. And then this is representative of the clear glass, although it's impossible to see what that looks like in a computer slide. And then the stone is the same stone sample that we've had at Town Hall since last year, actually, that we provided the building committee as a sample. And even the silver that we got, because we got the specified manufacturer, is the same silver that we left at Town Hall last year and has been available to the committee. So no real change, but we're under a bit of pressure to approve these materials so that they can get ordered. The wood material comes from Europe, so there's a little bit of a lead time on it. And we just wanted to report back to the committee and basically say, we got the manufacturer we wanted, we got the colors we wanted, and we'll leave those at Town Hall, but we'll be moving forward with that approval process. Any questions related to that?
Just real,
I had a question, but I can't see on my phone where to raise my hand, if I can ask.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So Scott, thank you for showing us this. I appreciate us revisiting it, and I understand your desire to try to make the buildings different. My only concern with the gold is just that it's reading very mustard, and I do worry about with the yellowish tone from the stone and the mustard yellow of the wood, that it's just going to feel very yellow. I personally don't see an issue with using the copper on Hosmer and having them match, and I'm curious what the committee thinks as well.
Yeah, I would say that the gold does not read as yellow as it does on this slide. It would definitely be worth taking a look at the sample at Town Hall, because even the sample that we have already left at Town Hall, if you may recall, looked much more like a light maple than it did. This almost looks like the gold that you would see in a pine, but the sample that we left at Town Hall and the sample as it actually appears looks more like a light maple.
Somebody else had raised the question.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, that was me. I was just going to ask where the samples were at Town Hall before. You'd left some with me, Scott, in the planning office. I'm not sure if that's where you intended to put new samples or.
Yes, we plan on leaving those in the same location tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Can they be out in the hallway, Steve, or?
Sure. I had them in my conference room in the top floor of Town Hall.
Okay,
Town Hall is closed to the public, so you'd have to call and make an appointment. But if you came into lower hearing room and just let them know what you're there for, it should be no problem.
We can also leave those at the Hosmer job site trailer if that's easier for anybody.
That seems easier than making an appointment.
Yeah.
All right, we'll make sure they get left at the Hosmer job site trailer in the morning.
And Scott, when do you need a decision? When's your submittal due?
Well, the the required turnaround is 14 days on the submittal, and we received it about a week ago, maybe 6 days, excuse me, 6 days ago. So it's really just about trying to get the contractor response as soon as possible.
Okay,
And-
Mr. Chair,
we have John Ports and then Dee Dee and then Vinnie. John Ports.
Just a quick, well, I guess I'm not clear, follow up from what Kelly was just saying. Are we going to vote on these again, or did we already did that earlier? It wasn't quite clear there.
Yeah, we're not asking for a vote, really. We're just reporting, and if there was a concern, for example, if we had received one of the original, the reason they're a little bit different is there were some members of the committee that felt strongly that there should be a slight difference between the two schools. And so we had presented these two colors as the colors for the buildings.
Yeah.
And we had indicated that that's the way we would be proceeding. We changed the renderings and everything. And so now, but we also indicated that when we got the actual manufacturer, we would just circle back to the committee and confirm that we had gotten those colors. And so the samples that you'll be seeing at the Hosmer job site are the same as the samples that we left previously at Town Hall, but they'll be labeled exactly like this so you can distinguish them.
Okay. All right, thank you. My other question was just, and I don't remember whether we talked about this before, but particularly the wood pieces, do those fade or alter their color in some way over time under the sun, or are they kind of typically don't?
These do not, because they're protected by a phenolic resin. They're coated. It's not as if the actual wood is exposed.
Okay.
Now, I would point out, because we talked about this a little bit also, at one point in time, these are all face fastened, but at one point in time, we had talked about possibly highlighting the fasteners. And then I believe it was Kelly mentioned that we probably didn't want that kind of aesthetic. So the fasteners will be color coded to the wood. They essentially go away and you won't see them from the ground. And so it will be face fastened, but they all blend in. There's not any effort to accentuate those fasteners.
Dee Dee.
So I think that it's already been stated, but Kelly had asked that question about preferences for differentiating between the two schools. And I'll just reiterate that I do think that each of them have their own natures. And I do think that there'd be a place to have a slight differentiation in the color. I just think that it gives them their sense of community and just a little bit of a independence. So that's all I wanted to say.
Vinnie.
Thank you. Scott, I think you had mentioned at one meeting that color, the gold color for the Hosmer School was the same material that was used on the community rowing boathouse on the Nanton Road. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, which I know that because my son used to row there. So if you go there and you look at it, it reads more like more like maple. So if you drive, down on Nanton Road, or you can even see it from North Beacon Street, it actually looks pretty sharp. And that building has been there. That's been now, what, 12, 15 years or something. So you can see how it's stood up the test of time.
Kelly, you had your hand up again?
Yes, I just wanted to say that, Vinny, I love that building. So thank you for pointing that out. And that color is great. And Dee Dee, I agree with your comment. So Leo's having a hard time connecting. And so he had mentioned something about the brightness of the composite metal panel, Scott. And so I just wanted to see if you could speak to that. I don't know if he can hear us or not.
Yeah, I'm on. I can actually hear us. I
Okay.
appreciate you raising the point, because I did bring this up at a few meetings, and I would like to know from Scott if he explored color options among the Aluka bond, or if he just kind of stuck with the silver that he landed on very early on. And the reason is I was worried about reflectivity, yes, but also I'm worried about these various volumes, silver volumes and then wood volumes, looking disparate and looking not integrated. If the metal was toned, anything that would be warm or connected to the tones within the wood, I could see it. I mean, anything from champagne to light bronze to zinc, even anything that appears in nature, I could see integrated into this building. But bright anodized style silver, I think, is something that we should like really strongly think about. If these masses will look integrated with this particular tonal combination.
Well, I think that we did take a look at, to answer your initial question, Leo, we did take a look when we received the samples at Alucobond's entire color line. And they, as you know, they have a lot of colors available. And we made a slight adjustment to the silver because we didn't want a high level of reflectivity. And then we wanted something that was complementary to the anodized frames that we would have in the windows without attempting to be like the anodized frames. So we think that when we put together the palette of the actual materials, the clear glass, the anodized aluminum for the frames, the metal panel from Alucobond in the silver that we selected, and then the wood. For both buildings, we thought it was a really nice palette, even considering the volumes, the massing, the area, as you mentioned. So, I mean, I think we're very comfortable with that. If you'd like to take a look at those samples.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Alucobond. Thank you very much. I would like to know specifically what color that you chose, where you landed. So I will go ahead and look at those samples, or you can just let me know what color, because I have a lot of Alucobond samples myself.
Okay.
So I just want the committee to hear me, because basically the glass in these buildings will read dark, right? And so you're going to put anodized aluminum mullions windows on dark glass, which means those are really going to stand out and be pronounced, right? So you're really going to feel the mullions on the building, and now you're going to have silver volumes connected to a lot of, busy windows. And to me, I think that it could feel a little bit more integrated with another tone. I need to land specifically on what silver he's talking about, but I look at a lot of architecture in my career, and I try and remain current on it. I personally don't know of precedents with this color combination that look really great. If Scott could share some with me, that would be fantastic, or share some with the committee. That might help kind of wrap my head around it. I don't want to stand in the way, but I just can't really. I would love to see some precedents, because here we are doing phenolic wood like every other school in Massachusetts currently being built, and we're about to pair it with anodized aluminum. And I think that we need to be aware of what we're getting here. Tonally, I'm not sure it's gonna blend perfectly.
I can certainly send you,
at least look timeless.
I can certainly send you that that specific information, Leo.
Okay, thank you.
We need to kind of move on. Scott, you said we really don't need a vote tonight?
That is correct, but we are going to release those woods because there's just such a long lead time associated with those.
But to Leo's point, are we okay on the metal panel?
I would say that I would like to take a look at how much time we have and if the lead time is quite as critical on the aluminum, and then I would like to exchange some information with Leo.
Okay, let's move. I guess we can move forward with the wood selection, but if you can work something out with Leo, and if we have to have a special meeting just to approve it, we will do that.
Okay, let's do it.
And I'm only saying this because this is really this is really a high school meeting, and I don't want to dwell on the elementary schools as much tonight. And there's an audience member that agrees with Leo. So let's move on, Scott.
Okay, sounds good. So on the high school project, our goal tonight is to just quickly highlight the past options the committee has had a chance to take a look at, and those would include, and we'll talk about what those are, but option 3D, option 3E, and option 4E. And 3D and 3E utilize the Phillips site and the existing high school site. You may recall those from our last discussion. 4E utilizes only the stadium. You may recall that from our prior presentation. 4D utilizes only Victory Field, the actual track for the construction of the new building. And we've shown a version of 4D, but tonight we're going to show a much more detailed version and talk about it. But the primary purpose of tonight is to talk about 4D because we haven't talked about that in detail, and then to talk about 2B because we haven't looked at a detailed version of 2B. And as a reminder, 2B is a renovation in addition to the existing high school. So lots of focus on what 2B means, and then going to 4D, and then we'll quickly go through the other options. As a reminder, we put them all into the same presentation, even though you've seen 3D and 3E and 4E before, because we're proposing that this be the same presentation that we provide to the community a week from tonight. And it's just nice to have it all in one collective package. So that's the purpose of including them all tonight. Starting with 2B, and again, this is the renovation addition to the existing high school. The primary driver for considering this kind of project is an effort to keep the original 1925 high school building, so preserve that building as part of a project, and then also to preserve the Phillips building, the original Phillips building, as part of a project. Now, why would we do that? The couple reasons: the Historic Commission has encouraged the building committee to take a serious look at preserving the 25 building and the Phillips building. So we certainly want to do that. And then also the MSBA requires, as part of this process, us to take a real firm look at the possibility of reusing the existing facility. So those are the drivers for this building. This is a slide the building committee has seen before. It simply talks about the various pieces, the original 1925 building footprint, and the additions that have occurred over time. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. This is also a slide the building committee has seen before. It just highlights in areas of the building how challenging the column configuration is. For example, this is the video production, the cable access studio on the lower level. And you can see they've attempted to retrofit around a lot of columns, but it wouldn't be ideal. It's not ideal for this space. It wouldn't be ideal for any space. So it just highlights some of the challenges of the existing building structure. And then this is showing that even, and this is, again, is a slide that the building committee has seen before, but we were just highlighting the fact that even if you look at the original 1925 high school, the area in green is the only area that remains even from the original 1925 high school. That's the auditorium area of the building and some small classroom areas. This is a slide that we also presented previously, in that we were pointing out that, for example, in the option 3 schemes, where we do a completely new high school, there's a significant advantage of being able to tuck some parking on the ground level underneath the building. And we're just pointing out that obviously if we keep the 1925 building footprint, it would be impossible to achieve that same parking. So we've got to achieve parking in another way, in a different, utilizing a different strategy for this scheme 2B. And then this is a slide that we also presented last time. It's been adjusted a little bit graphically, but it's just pointing out that we're preserving the 1925 high school building, the 1937 Phillips building. There are a couple of things that have to happen in order to be able to pull off a renovation in addition to the existing high school. One is we clearly would have to break that kind of project into a lot of different phases. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that could happen. And then secondly, we have to have some swing space. Even if we're going to do a phased occupied renovation addition to the existing high school building, meaning we're going to break it into a number of different phases and move students and staff to different locations of the building to free up different portions of the building for renovation and different portions of the site for additions, we've got to start somewhere. We've got to have some real estate to start with. So the best option we believe for doing that is to make the real estate where the current gymnasium and physical education space is located available as a starting point for this kind of project. So for that reason, we're proposing a new health, PE, and athletics complex, along with a new council on aging, because we need to demolish the existing council on aging to make enough space to achieve this. We're proposing that a new physical education facility be constructed in the very first phase, and we'll talk about this in more detail when we go through the phasing, but that starts to free up a construction zone for the first phase of the high school project. And we'll walk through that in a moment, but it's important to understand. The obvious question is, if we're doing a renovation in addition to the high school, why would we be doing anything across the street at the Phillips site? And the answer to that is, we need some space to work with. And so we create our swing space for the phasing by proposing a new physical education facility across the street at the Phillips site. Now, the other reason we need to utilize the Phillips site is because we just don't have enough real estate on the high school site to renovate the existing building, expand it to meet the necessary program, and also get enough parking on that site. So those are the drivers behind the ultimate phasing and approach to this kind of scheme. This is a summary of how we would propose that the phases be broken down in this kind of project and this kind of approach. And as I mentioned, in the first phase, there would be a new high school and our new physical education, athletics facility and complex constructed on the Phillips site. It would also include a council on aging building. We'd propose going ahead and renovating the portion of the Phillips that was necessary to accommodate district administration and the other program functions that need to occur in that area, but doing that as a first phase. We anticipate that would be about 18 months. That frees up this area that you see identified as phase 2, because it allows us to demolish the existing gymnasium and physical education space. And so that would be the first, the second phase here would be the first work on the actual high school site. Then there would be, and that's we'll look at it in floor plan, but that's primarily new academic area, because we would need to start moving students out of the existing academic area in order to renovate those areas. So we're trying to get new academic space, multi-level academic space. And then you see phase 3 where we get more of that academic space. And then we finally have enough space to be able to go into the existing high school building and start emptying portions of that out and moving the students into the new area. But even that has to be broken into 2 separate phases, phase 4 and phase 5, because we don't have enough area to move all the students out. So ultimately, we propose in this kind of project, breaking it into those 5 basic phases. You can see, and we'll talk about this a little bit with the timeline, but you can see that essentially becomes a 5-year project, 5+ year project, in that scenario. Almost 6 years when you add in the site work associated with the project. So a long timeline to try to make that happen in the right way. These are the conceptual floor plans for that kind of approach, and you can see that if you created an imaginary dividing line across this building where I've got my arrow, everything to the left would be Council on Aging, and then everything to the right would be gymnasium, physical education, etc. And then this is the Phillips building that's being renovated and connected to that facility, and then essentially maintaining the existing parking area or similar configuration to the existing parking area on that site. And then on the high school side, the 1925 building, maintaining the auditorium, media center, but doing pretty substantial renovation to all levels in other areas of the 1925 building. And then in order to get natural light to all the academic spaces, it really is going to have to be a courtyard scheme where we wrap the academic on multiple levels around and connect it back to the building. And then in order to get the appropriate amount of parking on this space, we're really going to need a multi-level garage at this corner of the site to be, and regardless of what those spaces are, we say 140 spaces, it may be less than that, but regardless of the number of spaces, we're going to need some kind of multi-level garage structure in the corner of the site. This gives you a sense of just the massing of the building. It's not intended to represent necessarily the aesthetics or the architecture, but as we've done with the other massing models, we've applied windows to help you get a sense of the scale of the building. We've got the three-story academic matching up with the existing three-story building, and then you can see the kind of massing around the gymnasium and then the Council on Aging building and the scale and proportion of those buildings in relation to the existing Phillips building. Probably most importantly, you can see how much of the site gets displaced by the addition to the existing 1925 building, which ends roughly here and represents the front area. It just gives you a sense of the overall size and scale. And then this just color codes, this massing model just color codes the phasing that we talked about earlier, where this addition and the renovation work in the Phillips really needs to happen as part of a phase 1. And then this portion of the academic building as part of a phase 2. Another area of the academic building as part of phase 3. That's the bulk of the new construction, and then going into the existing building to renovate phases 4 and 5. That's just showing the existing building footprints of the two buildings, the Phillips and the 1925 high school building. The physical building additions in orange, and then the lightly shaded orange is the parking garage area. And then going back to the floor plans, again, athletics, gymnasium, health and PE in this zone, Council on Aging. On the very lowest level of the existing 1925 building, we're proposing to keep the kitchen facilities and some of the service areas that exist on that lowest level, because it still makes sense to keep those in that particular area for access from a service area at the parking garage. And then we're proposing on that same level to do the addition that begins the new academic zone. And then if we move up a level, this is the upper level of the gymnasium. I'm sorry, sorry, jumped a slide. Upper level of the gymnasium where we'd have an indoor walking track, much like the other schemes. The upper level, second level of the Council on Aging. And then on the upper level of the existing high school, that's actually the street level on Columbia Street. Media Center would continue to be right off the main entry, auditorium, existing auditorium right off the main entry. We are proposing some reconfiguration to bring band and choral to that same level and bring it closer to the auditorium. And then you can see the academic zone starting to stack up on the area below. Another level to the parking garage. And then on the third floor level, again, a third level of new academic area, and then reusing some of that existing program within the 1925 building for the arts programs. And so that's certainly a lot of information on 2B. The reason we wanted to get this to the building committee ahead of time is to give you a little bit of time to digest it. And we're going to have an opportunity over the next couple of months to continue to discuss it. But I guess it's probably a good time to address any questions associated with 2B. I will say that we're going to be, and you've already seen it because you had the building committee presentation previously, but you are going to see that there's a significant cost premium associated with this kind of project for a variety of different reasons. Probably the most significant of which involves the way it has to be phased and constructed, but also the way it's certainly a complex project to try to save and convert the 1925 building and engage it with an addition. So the cost premium is significant associated with that. We're going to talk about that in the context of the other options in a moment, but I'm happy to answer or address any questions the building committee may have.
Yeah, we have 3 right now. Paul and Stacy first. Paul.
Scott, with this option, I'm assuming we're talking about keeping the students on site through all of the construction?
We are.
So 6 years of construction with the kids right in the middle of it?
That is correct.
Okay, I just think that's a recipe for disaster. And I'm guessing we're not going to come up with like a Catholic high school in the neighborhood that we could move them to. That was a bit of a long shot, but I just think I don't like the idea of having the kids 6 years in construction. That's a long.
Yeah, you know, it's something that the location of the students is something that the building committee had to really address several months ago, and we started talking about the possibility of just renovating a portion of the high school or trying to do a phased occupied renovation on site. And you raise a really good point. It's not easy, but there are examples of small elementary schools that have been relocated for a short period of time when their buildings are being completed, but it's very different when you have a high school with a much greater population and requiring much more detailed spaces programmatically in terms of labs, vocational space, et cetera, and a much longer duration to hope that we would ever find a relocation spot. So from very early on, we realized that any renovation addition to the high school was going to be a super complicated, complex project with a lot of impacts on a lot of different people, including the neighborhood and certainly on the school department.
Okay, thank you.
Laurie Cable.
Scott, is there a possibility that you can spreadsheet these where we can see them line by line, like, you know, option 2 and across says which ones are, you know, students there, students off campus, which ones, the timeline, the cost on like one spreadsheet? I know it would be kind of a long spreadsheet. I know that there's going to be a lot of differences, but I mean, these presentations are great, but for me, it's just easier to see everything side by side and to know exactly what I'm looking at.
Sure, we can. I mean, at this point in time, this option 2B is the only option where we keep the student, we're doing phase occupied construction with the students on the same site that the majority of the construction is going on, because we gave up on most of those schemes early on in this process. And the only reason this one is still in play is kind of twofold. One, we want to take a legitimate shot at showing what maintaining the existing 1925 building would look like. And then secondly, the MSBA is going to require us to have taken a detailed look at it. But we can certainly take that information you're talking about in the preferred schematic report, which is the document that we ultimately produce that summarizes the options the building committee is currently looking at. We do have to make some of those comparisons in spreadsheets and in matrices. So
Yeah, that would be great, because I think there are positives and negatives on every single one, and we all, we're even on this board, what we weight more value than others is different. So I just think seeing that and would be helpful. So thank you.
Steve Magoon.
Thank you. Scott, just real quickly, I think with this option, one of the values is the aesthetic of the front of the high school. So I just encourage you for the public presentation to maybe add a perspective of what it would look like from that side, just because I think that's the value of the existing high school.
sure, that's a good point.
Tom Tracy.
I really don't have a question. I just have a comment. I do not like the length of time. I don't like that the kids would be on the site. And I know those things were stated already, but of everything we've looked at, this is by far my least favorite. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly.
And I know that Steve talked about like some aesthetically pleasing views from the front, but I have to go back to the above ground parking garage. Like, you can dress up a parking garage as much as you want, but at the end of the day, it's a parking garage. That's going to be highly visible, especially to those neighbors. And I just cannot see this flying with the neighbors. So I have major concerns with that design aspect.
Lindsay.
Similar comments, to me, the view of the school and the impression that you get of it from different angles is really important. I agree with Kelly that the parking garage will really take away from that for the neighborhood and from multiple angles of the school. I also think that a lot of other things we've seen on this site do a better job kind of presenting the school to the town from the Common Street side and, kind of holding on to that front of the school from the Columbia Street side that doesn't really get that kind of view or presentation to the town unless you're actually going into the building. Doesn't seem worth it to me, especially given the cost, the time, and the real long list of challenges that go with this particular project.
Heidi.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Scott, in the rendering, there wasn't a bridge over Common Street to connect the two properties, and we had brought up multiple reasons at the last meeting why that, I think for most of us, I don't want to speak for anybody else, would be preferable based on, weather and safety, and crossing the street all the time might back up traffic coming from the other end. So there'd be a lot of issues there. So is that an option to put a crosswalk with this renovation, or was that just not shown on this? And how would that affect this? Sorry, I'll just add, I agree with Tom. This is my least favorite option, but at least finding out if there is something that can be done with the crosswalk.
Sure, certainly something could be done with the crosswalk. Something could also be done with a pedestrian bridge. We tested a pedestrian bridge, and it was a little awkward as we attempted to maintain the two original buildings and put the bridge in the right location. It was a little awkward, but either one of those things, either a bridge or a crosswalk modification could take place. We don't currently have the cost for a pedestrian bridge in the cost estimate, but it would be easy to determine what that might be. And if for example, the committee were to decide that we needed to explore this in more detail, we could even show what that pedestrian bridge might look like.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I do think having the bridge versus the crosswalk is really important for the safety of the kids and keeping them out of the weather, et cetera. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I don't want to spend a
just
lot
have
of
a
time.
quick
Yeah, go
question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Leo.
All great points raised. Clearly, Scott has it within his scope and his fee to explore all these options. Is there any way that the committee could provide him preliminary guidance to kind of pare back some of these? I just think that we're running down the road of exploring options that are good in terms of like exercises, but realistic for our town, I don't know, and I want to help the processes. Like, at what point do we get to help guide his selections?
Well, what we're going to try to do, Leo, and I'm going to try to take this, Scott. We're going to have the community forum next week, present all of these options, and it's fairly clear already tonight that some members of the school building committee have said this is their least favorite option so far. So I think we're working over the next couple of meetings, we'll be working towards guiding Scott in a direction. And I think that's going to happen probably sometime sooner rather than later. But we do want to
Perfect.
also have the
Great.
opportunity.
And I agree. It has to include the public. So thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Dee Dee. Dee Dee?
I know, I'm having some Zoom troubles.
Sorry.
I just to once again state the fact that we have to do this because of the MSBA process, no matter what. So in the end, we have to present this to the MSBA. It doesn't mean that we like it or not, but it is part of the process. So, and I don't prefer this in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, thank you, Dee Dee. I appreciate the reminder. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on, Scott.
Just a reminder on 3D and 3E, we're utilizing the combination of the Phillips site and the existing high school site. This starts off with 3D. I'm not going to review all the advantages again because I think the committee is familiar with this option, but this is the option that creates the pedestrian bridge. It leaves a lot of open space and green space on the existing high school site, locates the majority of the academics and what we refer to as the academic building on the Phillips site. But this is the option because it had the bridge and it achieves a lot of the programmatic goals educationally that the committee seemed very positive on in our last couple of discussions. And then we also, and I would point out again that this is not intended to represent the aesthetics. It's more intended to show the massing of the building and give you a sense of size and scale and show that programmatically we can get the adjacencies we need in the floor plan. But we would expect this to evolve significantly once the committee takes a direction on the preferred option. And we talked about the way it would be phased, but it's much more simple. A brand new academic building gets completed, completely independent of the activity going on in the high school. And then we have the ability to go over and demolish the high school while leaving the gym in place, which sits right in this location, and then finish out with a third phase. We went through that before, so I'm not going to talk about that a lot. I don't want to get, again, too involved in the floor plans because we would hope those would evolve once a direction is selected. And then we do want to just point out that 3E was a similar concept with no pedestrian bridge. And I think a number of committee members, as they have tonight, in our prior discussion, voiced concern about any option that did not include a pedestrian bridge. So I think of the two option 3s, option 3D, because of the pedestrian bridge, received stronger support from the building committee in prior discussions. I'll stop briefly on those option 3 versions, but to see if there are any follow-up questions, but it really wasn't our intent to discuss those tonight.
I don't see anyone, Scott, raising their hand at this point.
So we're going just a bit of discussion about the option 4 scenarios, because 4D proposes to just utilize Victory Field with the track. And when we say Victory Field with the track, there's a property line actually that comes through here, although all of this is owned by the town, that sort of separates the Victory Field with track area from the stadium area. So we've started to talk about them as 3 distinct sites: the stadium site, and it's really represented by the boundary that you see here, with the exception that it also includes the bleachers, and then the Victory Field with track site, which is here. And then in the past, although it's been eliminated, we talked about the DPW site, which was here. I want to first talk about 4D, because it proposes a 4-story high school building essentially right on the track and field area, with the preservation of as much green space around the perimeter as possible. It fronts onto Orchard Street. It would be built in really a couple of major phases. The construction of the new building, the new complete new high school, and then a second phase where the existing high school would be demolished. Keep in mind that when we take away the track and field, we have to do our best to replicate those amenities. So we would need to introduce a track. We've talked about the fact that, we've talked in the past about the fact that there's not a sufficient area at the existing high school to do a track. So we would need to create a new stadium with a track on this site as part of a 4D scenario. And then after that project is complete, go to the existing high school site, demolish that existing high school, and introduce a field, sort of a multi-purpose field with baseball overlapping at the high school site. So really a lot of activity at both sites in the end, and a real change of scenery and a lot of impact at both sites at the end of this kind of proposed project. I know there are many who've talked about the loss of green space and the value of this property as a green space in town. We'll be including that in our report. But under this scenario, the proposal would be to place the building on the Victory Field site. This is just showing what that looks like. Here's Orchard Street. The track and field that currently exists today would be under this building, obviously removed as part of the new proposed building construction. And then when I said that the stadium would have to be rebuilt to include a track, that's exactly what's happening right here. And then stopping at the property line for the DPW, that would be the proposed conceptual site layout for this kind of building, with the parking wrapping and circulation wrapping around the building. Just to give you a sense of the massing, clearly occupies, even at 4 stories, occupies a significant part of the available green space, with the parking loop around it. Gives you a sense of the scale of the new stadium. Now there is a drop off of Orchard Street down to this stadium, so this would actually be down quite a bit from Orchard Street, but then it would be on grade access, or you would be able to drive right into the site from Orchard Street in that location. As part of this kind of project, because this existing stadium would be lost at some point in time and the track would be lost immediately, we would generally propose that there be a subphase in the very beginning where the new track and field is put in place, so that you have that amenity available for the remaining duration of the construction under this scenario. And so this is just showing that kind of phase 1A where the track and field could occur early on in the phase, and then the continued construction and development of the remainder of the site to create the academic building. And then this is demonstrating how on the existing high school site, and it could obviously be developed in a lot of different ways, but here we're trying to replicate the baseball and then doing that on an overlapping multi-purpose field, and then showing, just for scale purposes mostly, kind of what a field house might look like if it came, a small field house came with the functions that would be associated with these fields, and then a playground and a basketball court. We're showing the floor plan layout more to just demonstrate programmatically that we can get the adjacencies that we need in a 4-story building academically. But again, as we're looking at these conceptual options, we're not spending a lot of time on the floor plans, because our goal would be once a preferred option is selected, or at least narrowed down, then would really start to engage in a lot more detail the faculty, staff, and administration on the design, the specific design of the school, rather than waste their time, for example, doing detailed analysis and having detailed discussions about every single option, and then several of the options no longer being in play after a preferred option is selected. This is just showing those upper academic levels. We're going to talk a little bit, about cost in a summary sheet later on in the presentation, but I would point out that if, in terms of just the cost of the new high school, this is one of the more expensive options, because it displaces a track and field and a stadium in a way that requires the complete rebuilding of those. And so for that reason, it becomes a relatively expensive approach to addressing the high school, but we'll see that in some of the cost comparison data later on, but could certainly answer any questions associated with this scenario.
Why don't we, Scott, run through the next option as well, and then we can take questions, because it's all kind of related.
Perfect. So this is option 4E, and again, any option 4 involves some kind of construction in this area of the town, some kind of high school construction in this area of the town. 4E, as you may recall, was specifically confined to the stadium site. In other words, the goal here is not to disturb the track and field and only use the stadium site. Now, it's a much more limited land area. It's approximately 1 3/4 acres smaller than the Victory Field and track area. And it's also, its shape is also not as conducive in that it has a very limited amount of frontage on Orchard Street, which forces us to try to do on-site circulation, get completely around the building and get out again, just from an emergency fire safety standpoint. So all of those things end up, and we're going into the topography at the very back of the site. It gets a little challenging at the very back. Now, what happens, as you may recall, as a result of this, is in order to get any parking, enough parking, or even any parking on site, we really need to do first level parking underneath this portion of the building. So we propose in this scenario a gymnasium auditorium structure that's elevated off the ground by a single story, so that we could get parking underneath that area. And in this scenario, much like the 4D scenario, all this happens in a single phase. And then we go to the existing high school site, demolish that building, and attempt to replicate some of the amenities that are being eliminated as a result of placing the high school where the stadium exists now. And this site plan was just showing the preservation of the existing track and field, sort of, and we described this as shoehorning the high school into the available area with parking going underneath the gym and auditorium. This is showing that level of parking underneath the building. This is the first floor of this academic building, but in that same area on the first floor, we proposed parking, and then above that, the gym and the auditorium. And you can see the massing of this building. This building really needs to face towards Victory Field because it has such a limited amount of street frontage on Orchard Street. We could certainly debate it, changing that and considering variations that attempt to front on Orchard Street, but we weren't having much success with that. And in general, as you may recall, we just didn't like the idea of shoehorning this building into this small area, considering the other options that the town will have available to them. So we weren't particularly excited about this option, even when we presented it previously. This is just color coding those phases, giving you a sense of what that field would look like. We keep as a reminder, you know, this option keeps the track at the Victory Field site, so we don't have to replicate a track, but it displaces the stadium. So we need to bring the stadium, and you can see a track would not fit here. It wouldn't go around it wouldn't fit around the stadium, but we would need, if we're going to replicate the stadium that gets displaced, we would need to bring a stadium to this location, build some bleachers into the side of the hill that are flush with Columbia Street on the top side, and then at the field level on the lower side. As a reminder, there's about a 10-foot drop in topography across there. And we weren't particularly fond of bringing the stadium to this site either as part of this option. So we talked about that a little bit previously with the building committee. And the floor plans for that, again, show on that first floor level, parking, then on the second floor level, the gym and auditorium above that. And that's for you. I rushed through that, I know, but we did take a look at all those slides previously with the building committee.
Questions from the committee? Paul.
Scott, I'm guessing that School Building Authority would not be reimbursing for the relocation of those athletic amenities, or do they?
They do not. Once we leave the existing high school site with our program, meaning options 4D and 4E, the School Building Authority would not participate in the cost of demolition of the high school.
Oh.
They would not participate in the cost of the abatement of the existing high school. And then, as you point out, they would not participate in the cost of recreating the stadium, the track, or any of those fields.
Thank you.
Lindsay.
Hi. Scott, in 4D, it looks like baseball does fit on the old site, but in 4E, because you're also having to replicate the football stadium, it does not. Because I thought previously we had discussed that baseball never fits there, but it seems to kind of in 4D, right?
You are correct.
Okay.
If we don't have to do the stadium and we don't have to meet a certain size soccer field, here the baseball is clearly a priority, and it does.
Right.
I would point out that this is not ideal orientation, and you're going to have a short left field with a really high monster.
We're building a green monster? No. Okay.
So it's not ideal, but we've attempted to work it in there as you
Sure.
point.
Yeah, I mean, just similar to, what I commented before, I feel like the 4E option on the stadium site, it just feels really squished and forced and doesn't feel like a great place to try to put that school, especially with traffic and flow on Orchard Street with the Lowell right across the street.
We would agree with you.
I saw Steve and Tom, but they take their hands down.
My question was going to be about the baseball on 4E, so
Okay.
Lindsay beat me to it.
Okay. Tom, Steve, did you get your question answered?
I'm good.
Okay. Are there any other questions here from the committee? Anybody in the audience that has questions on the presentation to this point? Please raise your hand. Maureen Foley. If we could give Maureen Foley access again, please. Maureen.
Unmute yourself.
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes, I'll do it for her.
Okay. Maureen, are you there? Maureen?
There she is.
There we go.
Okay, Maureen? Maureen? Okay, I guess we'll hold off for a minute. Maureen, I'll give you one more shot, but we'll come back to you.
You are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So all of these options are pretty overwhelming, I have to say. If you build it on, excuse me, if you build it on the track end, which looks more attractive, how are we going to do field hockey and track and football and all on the fall sports on one stadium? It doesn't even look like there are stands, number one. Number two, what happens to the old high school? Does it get demolished? Do we have access to another field if we demolish it? What happens to the old building?
Well, in the 4D scenario, you lose a lot of field space for a number of years while the project is going on. The goal would be to give back the track and the stadium with a track around it in the very first year of the project. And it probably takes 6 months to a year, depending on exactly what the design strategy is to get that done. So it's lost during that time period. But it's a very long time, as you point out, before you get back the remainder of the space, because we have to wait until the project is completely finished, the new high school is completely finished, and then go to the existing high school site and demolish all of that existing building and then start the construction on a new field. So those amenities you're describing get displaced for that entire duration of the project, which is about 3 years.
So if the historic commission said that we have to keep the 1925 building, does that mean we have to keep it forever?
I don't know the answer to that. Forever is a very long time.
I'll let Steve try to take that.
Sure. So the ability of the Historic Commission, their authority is to impose a demolition delay if they find a building to be preferably preserved. Their ability is limited, though. Their delay in that demolition is for a year. And so while there's the hope that some things could happen within that year, or that there might be a reconsideration in a way to preserve whatever historic character of that building is significant, that is the limit of their ability, is a year delay.
So in other words, In other words, the 1925 building is up in the air. I mean, there's no guarantee. Is
Well,
that true?
I don't know what you're talking when you're asking about a guarantee. We're looking at all options and we haven't even narrowed it down yet. So I would say that some of these questions may be answered a little bit later when you start focusing on a preferred option.
Well, the thing is that if we need to make more green space, because you're taking up green space, we have to have in the plan what the new green space is going to be.
I agree, but we're also have to, the committee is going to have to also consider the fact that one of the points you just made, if we choose to go over to Victory Field on one side or the other, missing those fields for our activities for 3 years is very significant. So all of those are going to have to weigh into the considerations that the committee will be talking about as we move forward. We also want to wait and present these to the community next Wednesday evening to see what they have to say. So I think we're still showing some options, but all of them have challenges.
Every one of them, it's overwhelming.
Yes.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. All right, thank you.
Anne Marie Clunan, please.
Anyone?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So the one question I just to follow up on the historical building, I would ask if it does get, they can delay it for up to a year, what type of a financial impact that would have on the project? And would we lose our funding from the state if that was built in to push us back for a year?
It doesn't really have any impact on the project schedule because the Historic Commission would be willing to hear the proposal on the high school at any point in time. So just as an example, if we went before them in the next year and asked for their input, if they did decide to impose a delay, we wouldn't even be proposing starting construction until another couple of years after that. So it wouldn't necessarily impact the project schedule if they imposed a delay. We really want them on board. I would say we really want them on board though, and I would point out that even when we go present to them, we want them to understand all of the challenges that the building committee in the town is facing with locating the high school and all the other priorities that the building committee is trying to balance. And we would obviously, if ultimately we are proposing to demolish the high school, we would present a lot of options to them on how we might preserve some of the history of the high school in the town in a new building through various design strategies. So we would hope that we could engage them in this process. And even though they can't really delay the overall project schedule, we'd really love to have their support in the end for whatever is proposed.
If I could just add quickly, just to remind people, because this is a state-funded project, we have to file a project notification with Mass Historic too. So, and we haven't entertained that, but we are going to have to make that filing. So, and they work generally pretty closely in coordination with the local historic. So we do need to go through the Historic Commission process to some extent, and like Scott says, try to convince them of what's the right merits of the project.
Okay, Emily Schatzow. Can we give Emily some access, please?
Yes, that's done.
Thank you.
Need to, okay, there you go.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, Emily.
Okay, I'm not Emily, it's Jolly.
Okay, why did it come up as Emily?
Because Emily and I co-host a group together. We have
Okay.
account together.
Fine, Jolly, go ahead.
Zoom mixed this up and I can't figure,
That's fine.
okay.
Go ahead and ask your question, Jolly.
Okay. So there, I have actually, I think 3 points. One is whoever it was who made the statement about the parking garage back on the site that is the Phillips and the current site. I want to echo that. I think it's like a brick in the plate of soup or something. It's pretty unattractive. That's how I'll put that. Anyway, and I don't know if you can do something to make that different. It also seems to me if you build on the Phillips and you keep the current gym, because it is closest to of the gym and the auditorium, the gym will be most used. That it's also closest to the Phillips, to the Phillips site. And is it possible just to keep like the gym and the auditorium of the old building and do something else as a way of dealing with the historic commission? That was another thought I was curious about. And I think that's it for now. 2, not 3.
Scott?
Just with regard to keeping the gym and the auditorium, I mean, the gym is not historic, so there, in our mind, there's really no value in keeping that. It's also right in the way of where you would want to do a connecting bridge and makes that almost impossible. And then kind of thirdly, it's underground. All of the locker rooms are subsurface there, which has always been a problem. So we want to resolve that as part of the project. And then because it's only single story in that location, it really prohibits us from taking advantage of multi-story construction there and recapturing the green space that we want to capture as part of the project. So in the auditorium, in the existing 1925 building, it would be impossible to just carve that out and save it. But it also, as a reminder, sits in the location that we're really trying to tuck some parking into to hide that from view with the option 3 scenarios. So it would be a little bit challenging to do that.
I only asked because that when you enter that part is attractive. I'm not wedded to keeping the gym or actually the auditorium. It just seemed that was one of the options in one of the sites. And is it one of the designs? And is it possible to do something else with that parking garage? Because it is pretty ugly. Is it possible to put it over on the Phillips site, maybe? I don't know.
I think that it's certainly, anything is possible. We could raise that entire building up and attempt to do parking underneath it. I think the question the building committee will ultimately have to weigh is that even as shown, which we think is probably, even though it's complex, it's probably the most straightforward way to address the issues that are created by keeping the 1925 building. If we start to change those parameters, it's just going to get more expensive. So if the building committee doesn't like 4B as presented, I think that they're going to find they like variations on 4B even less.
Okay. And the last thing is, I don't know if you all have talked about it, but all of this, even if we go with the MSBA and they pay for a percentage of it, the thought was to always have an override. And we haven't talked about the finances of it, but in this particular current situation, it seems really questionable.
Okay, thank you, Jolly. Lisa Feltner.
Thank you. Good evening. I would just like to request that the materials you're talking about be attached to the agenda so we could follow along.
They were.
I'm looking at the agenda and they're not on there.
And
Okay.
I said something at the beginning. We're working on that at this point. They were posted. They will be a link going forward to all of these agendas.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Lindsay.
Oh, me? I put my
Yeah,
hand
Lindsay.
down. Or a different Lindsay.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it
That's
was you,
okay.
Dee Dee.
So I just want to say that, I obviously as the school superintendent, I like both the options of 3D and 4D. I just wanted to comment quickly on the use of the athletic fields. Watertown Public Schools has always been challenged by athletic field space. And yes, we would certainly have to be very creative about where we would play our sports when a field goes down for 3 years. But that's something that, we feel that we would be able to somehow accomplish, but it might not be easy. I don't think it's insurmountable, but I just want to make sure people understood that we know that that would be a big challenge, but we are often challenged with our athletic fields.
Okay, thank you. Alodia.
You should be able to unmute, Alodia. Oh, good.
Scott, can you show the picture of this option just so it's up there instead of this?
I don't need the picture,
Okay.
Mark. I'm
No, I know.
totally-
Somebody else just asked for
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Alodia.
Okay, I'm totally opposed to this, as I'm sure you know, but I would just like to say, if we're so concerned about athletic fields, we've just invested over $1 million to light Philip Park. Let's stop renting out our fields to BB&N. We've got plenty of field space if we start doing a few more things in this town correctly. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. So Scott, let's move on to the cost portion of the presentation. Thank you.
So just because at some point in time it becomes critically important to talk about the cost impact of all these various options, particularly in relationship to one another, even though all we would have at this point in time is conceptual cost data. And the cost data that we're sharing was developed by our independent cost estimator, PM&C, who's been working with us in Watertown on all the other projects. But even they would tell you these are conceptual numbers, and we're really trying to get just an apples to apples comparison between the various options so that the committee can understand the premiums that may or may not be attached to them. And first, we've highlighted just the cost of the high school for a couple of reasons. One, it's important to see, and by just the high school, I mean no council on aging modifications or new building, no district administration building, no district facilities building, just isolating the high school costs. You can see that, as I pointed out earlier, option 2B, as a result of the extended construction timeline and the multiple phases, even if we're just talking high school, is significantly more expensive. And we've put a price range on these also, but it's significantly more expensive than any of the other options. And then, as I mentioned with option 4D, if we're just talking about high school costs, there's also a premium associated with it because we have to address the rebuilding of the stadium, the rebuilding of the track, the rebuilding of the baseball field, and then all of the work that would have to happen at the existing high school campus. So hence the premium associated with the high school project there. Now, interestingly enough, and I should point out while we're on this line item, a small delta in the big picture, at least, between 3D and 3E, and that's purely because of the pedestrian bridge that exists in 3D that does not exist in 3E. But for all practical purposes, those are obviously going to be very similar in cost magnitude. We've shown a cost range for the additional projects that come along with the various options. And so, for example, with 3D, when we consider the new Council on Aging building, the district administration building, and some space to address district facilities, we get cost range of the order you see at the bottom of the 3D column, which is not so different than the cost of 4D, just in terms of order of magnitude when we're talking about conceptual costs, except that if you consider it an advantage, the town would be addressing several other needs as part of the 3D option, whereas in 4D, that premium is being spent to rebuild the fields that get displaced. So I think it's just important to see some of those big picture items in the cost comparison data. We'll continue to be taking a look at this and refining it, but it's important to have some of these cost magnitude, some of this cost magnitude data at this stage, I think, in order to be able to have the committee continue to digest the information that we've talked about over the last several months.
Thank you. We have a question from Laurie.
Hey, Scott, I know that these are very preliminary. You know, that the cost of construction in the materials have gone up like exponentially, like every year in the last decade. And with COVID, have we seen an increase? And what do we think that is going to have? Do you think that increase is going to stay in the next few years, or do we think that it's going to fluctuate back to kind of the normal high construction increases, or where are we at with that?
In order to be relatively conservative, our cost estimator is assuming more than typical inflation for every year that these projects are pushed out, meaning because we're talking roughly about a potential 2023 start, he's automatically including inflation up to that point, and then for every year thereafter, depending on how many phases and how long the duration of these projects are, he's continuing to include that inflationary increase.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? Okay, so let's go on to timeline, I guess.
So I'll handle this, Mark. Before I do that, I want to just reintroduce to the committee Allison Ma, who joined back the team. Allison was our original project manager, and she was on maternity leave and had her baby Veda a month or so ago. So she's back. Well, several months ago now. She's been on maternity leave, but you'll be seeing more of Allison in the course of the project.
Welcome.
So I just want to kind of regroup people to the MSBA process. So you've seen all this slide before, and if you look at with the extensions we've had, we've pushed the funding vote out to the fall of 2021. So I just want to remind people that that's where the current schedule is heading to in terms of the vote. We are basically rough halfway in between that preferred schematic report, as you can see. So we're leading that toward, once we get to the preferred schematic, which is in the end of the year, we then move into schematic design, and that leads to that funding vote. So if you could, next slide, please, Scott. So again, and this is again a slide you saw the last time, sort of in the near term, our goal is to, bring these options in front of the community next week, meet back with you folks. We have to move forward the ad reno, a new option, and the base code repair, as we talked about, at a minimum. And if there are multiple new options, we can look at those. But the goal was because AI3 needs to spend some time really drilling down on how these projects will, the MSBA, we really need to sort of finalize the layout of the building, and he really has to take that time with the school department. We are hoping that in September, or maybe at the end of August, if the committee's comfortable, we would be able to get at least a preferred or a preference around what they feel is a new option, even if that would be helpful. And that's kind of our goal in terms of trying to get to September, beginning in September, so that AI3 can take the fall to address some of those topics you see at the bottom of that options refinement. So again, we're leading toward a PSR submission in January, which will be a board vote of the MSBA, although we don't have that schedule. We're expecting that board schedule will be in February or March of 2021. Next slide, please. And then this is the community forum, but that's basically an update on kind of the context of our timeline.
Anyone have questions on the timeline? John?
Get back here. Just kind of remind us, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is several of these steps have to go through an MSBA board vote. And so we kind of have to time to line up with those, but it was just mentioned. So one of the key ones will be like February, March, will be one of those key vote times for them.
Yes, that's why we're submitting that PSR in January.
Okay.
And then that preferred schematic report, and then that needs to be submitted, generally about 6 to 8 weeks before the board meeting. I mean, they haven't set that board calendar for 2021, but that's when they'll approve the option that we move into design.
And would they take a vote prior to we have a community, if we have a debt exclusion vote in the fall, would they take a vote prior to that?
So then the second vote is that vote in the fall for the board, which again, they haven't set, but we would be looking at, we're looking now at sort of that being in October, an October board meeting. That would be when we actually have the full schematic design, or roughly 25% of the design done. We know the cost, we know the reimbursement, we know the schedule, the phasing in a much more detail. That would be what the town will vote at the ballot initiative in sometime after that.
So the MSBA votes in kind of authorizing, and they would vote before we do our debt exclusion vote.
They vote conditioned on the town approving the debt exclusion.
Yeah.
So the vote is conditioned on the town approving the debt exclusion.
All right.
It doesn't need to be before, but it's better to go in front of a town, the public, and say we have a vote and we have a project that the MSBA is willing to support. So that's kind of the timing we've set up.
Okay, thank you.
Could I add to that for just a minute? I think one key thing is to mention that we would be looking for the committee to vote in November to be ready for a January submission. There's a lot of work that has to happen after the vote that the preferred schematic or the selected site option, et cetera, is selected before the submission is ready. So just a note that the vote from the building committee would be in November of this year.
In September, we're looking, if it's feasible, if the committee feels comfortable, if we can narrow those new options to one that seems to be a preferred option.
And if I could just do one follow-up, Mark. So sure. The schematic design, you mentioned 25%. So that is 25% of kind of what would be like construction documents, which would be the other 75%, I guess. Is that one way to think about it?
I would call it more 25% of the design process. Scott can talk more about it, but I think it's not necessarily 25% of the construction documents, but it's the stuff that the construction documents would be built upon. So I don't know, Scott, do you want to add anything to that?
But it's sufficient to do a cost estimate with
Yes.
a level of certainty, I guess.
Yes, right.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the MSBA defines very specifically what has to be included in schematic design. And the reason it's a little bit confusing is what they require is significantly more elaborate and detailed than what traditionally would be considered schematic design. So because they do want to be able to complete very detailed cost estimates. They do want to be able to be very confident about the budget and literally lock in the price. They will not change the total project cost after that. So it's a really complete set of documents. It probably does represent 25% of the entire design and construction document process.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Laurie.
Yes, so I know we have to plan for normalcy, and I know that the schedule is not out for 2021, but has there been delays or change in schedules to the MSBA due to everything that's going on in the world right now? Have we seen that? Do we predict that the schedule will be the same in 2021, or do we think that it might be adjusted? And I know that you're just guessing on this, but I'm just wondering your thoughts.
I think you mean the MSBA schedule? Yeah, yeah, the MSBA board will meet every 2 months in 2021, just as they have, and generally it'll follow the same pattern that they've done in previous years. So I don't think you'll see any change because of this at all from everything we've heard.
Are there any other questions? I see no more panelists. Anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question on the timeline? Seeing none, we're going to talk about the community forum. Tim?
So we've set the forum for next Wednesday, July 29th at 6 o'clock, a virtual forum. There is an ad that's sort of being distributed around Watertown in different circles. It's on the website to the extent we can get the word out, obviously. That would be great. The forum, I think the content of it will be very similar to what you've seen here, and then allow for public feedback at appropriate points. So that's the plan, is to have that forum be as well attended as we can get it in July of the summer.
Are there any questions on the forum?
If I could just add to it, Mr. Chair, it's Christie.
Yes.
We'll distribute the flyer right after this meeting. I'll send it to the full committee, and I will put it on the website. We wanted to just have the discussion here at the meeting. So as Tim said, please share it. Social media, anything you can do, we'd greatly appreciate it.
And I'm going to ask Steve and Tom if you could help me make sure it gets on a notify me for the town. I will get it to the two newspapers, or Watertown News and Watertown Tab as well. So,
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out that at your discretion and the building committee's discretion, because this presentation for the community forum is so similar to tonight's, we could have that available at any time that you feel like it's appropriate to get it out to the public.
I would say we get it out right now. Are there any other questions? The summer building committee meetings, it appears we're going to try to do the first and third Wednesday and try to stay on that schedule. We had some issues this month with holidays and vacations. Any other business to come before the, hold on. Okay, anybody have any other business? There was a couple questions. One is that the forum is not on the town calendar. We didn't do that because we wanted to make sure everybody was okay with where we were going tonight, to put that out there for next Wednesday. It'll be on the town calendar tomorrow. And thank you for distributing the presentation. So,
yes.
Any other questions?
If I could, Mr. Chair, again, Christie, I would like to just remind everyone of the project website. It is linked to the Watertown Building for the Future website, and we have created a landing page. So basically, if people type in Watertown Building for the Future, you will land on a page that will take you with one link to the agendas and presentations, and that's where we had pre-posted the presentation for this evening, right in the same place where the agenda is posted. There's a link to the elementary school website, and there's a link to the high school website. So if I could just remind everyone, please visit the Watertown Building for the Future website.
Are there any other questions or comments? I think that's all on the agenda tonight, correct?
Correct.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Can I get a roll call, please, John?
Sure. Heidi Perkins,
Yes.
Lori Cabo, yes?
She's still muted. There you go.
I take that as a yes. Steve Magoon,
Yes.
Tom Tracy, Paul Anastasi,
Yes.
Kelly Curlbaum,
Yes.
Leo Patterson,
Yes.
Jenny Picciarelli,
Yes.
Lindsay Mosca,
Yes.
Edie Galston,
Yes.
Mark Sideris,
Yes, John Ports
yes.
and Tom Tracy, I think you were back? Yeah, okay.
And who was the second, please?
Steve Magoon.
Steve Magoon.
Thank you.
Thank you all for participating tonight. We'll see some of you next Wednesday, I hope. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye,
Mark.
everybody.
Good night.
Night.